Chapter 1. My first painful encounters with prices. My first life lessons on the power, importance, and effects of price were emotional and left a permanent imprint, but they didn't come in the university classrooms or corporate boardrooms where I spent much of my adult life as a professor or a consultant. No, the setting was one of the oldest forms of commerce known to mankind, a rural farmer's market. I grew up on a small livestock farm shortly after World War II. When our hogs were ready for slaughter, my father would bring them to the local wholesale market, where they would be auctioned off to butchers or traders. The sheer number of farmers who brought their hogs to market, matched by the large number of butchers and traders on the buy side, meant that no individual buyer or seller had a direct influence on the price of the hogs. We were at the mercy of the local cooperative, which cleared the transactions. They would tell my father the price he would receive, and thus determine how much money he could take home to our family. The same applied to milk, which we would deliver to the local dairy. We had absolutely no influence on the price. The dairy, again part of a cooperative, told us what the price would be. The milk price would fluctuate based on supply and demand. In times of an oversupply, prices would plunge. We never had hard numbers on supply and demand, only the impressions we gained from observing the market itself. Who else delivered milk? How much did they have? In every market my father went to, we were price takers. We had to accept the set price, whether we liked it or not. It was an extremely uncomfortable position. As anyone with a similar experience will attest, money is tight on a farm. These sales were our only source of income. I absorbed all these impressions as a young boy, and I must admit I didn't like them. Decades later, I would explain in interviews that these lessons taught me something which has guided me in running my own business and helping others improve theirs. Never run a business in which you have no influence on the prices you charge. I won't claim I articulated those thoughts exactly that way in the 1950s as a young boy, but I have that same visceral feeling today whenever I think about the price of pork or buy a gallon of milk. I am rather certain that these childhood experiences shaped my opinions about how businesses operate. To this day, I don't think much of a business that doesn't make money. Prices determine how much money you make. That much is clear. Yet how much influence can you exert on prices so that money isn't tight and you don't need to live month to month or quarter to quarter? And if you have that influence, what is the best way to wield it? Out of my childhood experiences came a lifelong passion to get better answers to those two questions. I was hooked. Pricing would become my lifelong companion. But the journey from the small farm to global pricing expert was anything but straightforward. Pricing student, the journey begins. In college, I was fascinated by lectures on pricing theories. They were mathematically elegant and often very complex. These challenging lessons gave me a solid set of ways to think about price problems, structure them, and solve them. They would become one more essential building block to my understanding of how pricing works. But the farmer's son in me noticed something right away. The professors and their students rarely talked about how any of these theories applied to real life. At the time, I had no idea that one could eventually apply these concepts to real-world problems. Only years later would I understand that the math also matters, and that it can provide companies a strong competitive edge when combined with other aspects of pricing. Pricing became an emotional experience again when I met Professor Reinhard Selten, who would go on to win the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1994 for his work on game theory. Professor Selten conducted a pricing experiment in class with real money at stake. He offered a prize of $100. One A player and 4 B players could divide this money up among themselves if they could form a coalition that lasted at least 10 minutes. Imagine now that you are the A player, which was my role. What would you do? What principles would you follow? What are your motivations? Keep those thoughts in mind as you listen. Toward the end of this chapter, I'll reveal how the experiment turned out. What I will say now, though, is that the results of this experiment cemented the word value in my vocabulary.